Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance.
The Equine Functional Posture course level 1 is coming up, the foundational level. And the reason that I developed this course was really to empower horse owners and horse professionals to improve the world for the horse. And to me, it's the foundational things that we need to pay more attention to be able to create that change. As a horse owner, there's a big responsibility for you to be the advocate for your horse. And they're not just a piece of equipment to be taken out and ridden, although there are places where this is the case. The horse's welfare as a horse rider and an owner is our responsibility. They can only communicate through their behaviour, posture, and movement, and it's really up to us to recognise when these are optimal for the individual and when they're not.
So when it comes to the Equine Functional Posture course, a really big core of this is that it really gives you the support and the direction to be able to put in place the right exercises, execution, and observations for real progress. And it's the link between noticing and advocating, or between seeing dysfunction and being able to do something about it. And I mean, sometimes it's the ability to see things you've never seen before if you're starting right at the beginning on this journey, so that you can begin to serve your horse with what they need when they need it. I know personally in my bodywork, the best part of the most effective and powerful part of anything I've learned has been developing my observational skills. And that has been a multi-year journey. And equinology was a big part of that for me. You've been a really big part of that. Equine science, my osteopathy diploma, but in my bodywork itself, the missing part has always been creating lasting change when the movement pattern is a major limiting factor, because that skill lies with the owner. And it is a skill. It really is a genuine, learned, intentional skill. It's wonderfully fun. Once you get into that world, it brings me more joy, honestly, than I've had in any other work I've done with horses. It's changed everything that I've done about training, about bodywork. It's a core foundation for me now. It's really added more value to my equestrian experience than anything else.
Yeah, like I've treated lots of horses, and, I've treated lots of horses where the owner keeps doing what they're doing, in the way that they're doing it, and they're kind of relying on me to create this big change. And it used to weigh down on me quite a lot when I was first a bodyworker, because I felt I was responsible for that horse's improvement, whether that horse won at the competition, whether they didn't win at the competition, the horse's behaviour. I felt like I was responsible for all of that. But what I've really seen over time is that when the owner genuinely puts the horse first and they take responsibility for, recognising their horse's behaviour, for recognising their communication, for making those daily observations, for telling me, instead of testing me, telling me, oh, like my horse was just, it was going really well, but now he's just not standing square with that leg when he's eating, or he's just resting those legs more, or, this exercise has improved and I've been doing this, this and this since your last visit. And I've noticed that these exercises seem really beneficial before I ride my horse. And these exercises that you gave me seem really beneficial after I rode my horse. I think I've talked before about the owner where I had a young horse with kissing spine. And I told her the exercises I wanted to do. And there was a couple of times when I came back and she's like, I didn't do them. It was too hard. The horse was rearing and, it just got too difficult. And I was, I was kind of not really sure where to go with that because I had seen the horse rear. He was dangerous. And I knew from a rehab perspective what the horse probably needed to do, but I could also see that the horse was struggling psychologically because it was really bored because it was a young stock horse. It's needed stimulation. Anyway, I just said, well, do your best that you can. Here's a few different options. I came back next time, which I only saw her every 4 to 6 weeks, right? So I'm limited in what I can do to be the biggest change in that horse's life. That owner is the biggest change in the horse's life. The owner is always the biggest change in the horse's life. And I came back and I said, oh, how's it going? And she's like, oh, well, I couldn't really do the things that you said, but I tried all the stuff at Liberty and I also applied the principles that you talked about. And when I take him out for a walk, I'm aware of how he's using his body and we're stepping over twigs and sticks. And, so I use the walk to do the things that you talked about. And then I play with him at Liberty and get him to follow me around and do the exercises and he doesn't even know he's doing them. And I was like, that's amazing. She took responsibility for that horse and her actions, and that was a game changer for that horse. So from that moment, that horse's progress was astronomical, and I've seen that happen time and time again. I've given people exercises, and the thing I say to people now is, if you can't do everything I tell you, do what you can do. Do something. Don't do nothing. Just pick something out of what I recommended. And if you want to change it to make it easier for yourself, figure out how to do it. This is what I'm looking for from my perspective. I want them to lift that shoulder, or I want them to get this engagement in their back. If you can come up with a better way to do that, then do it. Because you doing something is going to make progress for that horse. And I realized that that's where the responsibility lies, on the owner, not on the bodyworker, not on the saddle fitter, not on the hoof care professional, not on the vet. It lies with you as the horse owner and your responsibility to improve your knowledge, your skills, your tool set to support your horse better. It doesn't even, the responsibility is not on your horse either. That's definitely where I think we can lay a lot of blame on our horses and say, oh, well, they're just difficult.
Like you said, there's a lot of things that need to be taken care of in your horse's daily life and different things. And so we do need to look to and rely on for different things our professionals. But when it comes to your own participation, there's, just as you were saying, a human element, and to be thinking about the ways that we do things. I mean, even just thinking about the things that are easy and difficult for you and what habits you're using to try and get things done. There's a level of intentional thought, like a concerted, almost introspective, how am I going to make this work to be manageable, even if it's building from something small, so that you can also increase your ability. And I do, you often hear from people inside the course, they'll say, this feels a little bit hard today. And the wonderful thing when you get people who show up and say that, and they say, this was hard for me to start because I'm starting from the beginning. Maybe I don't have more of an observational eye like somebody else does, or I see somebody else experienced, or I'm listening to you guys talk and I feel out of my depth. But there is when you can offer the perspective that all you need to do is a little bit, because it doesn't matter how long it takes. The idea is just that you start somewhere and you're making a little change or a small observation or practicing a small exercise. Your ability is always going to increase. And if you're thinking about building a new skill, or if you are somebody who's considering joining the course, but it feels like a massive undertaking to try something new, there is the perspective that when you've learnt the core concept or the start of the core concept of something, when you learn new things in association, it's easier because you are putting coat hangers, or you are building on a system or a foundation that's already there. And so effortful understanding decreases, and so taking small action still takes you towards building your skill set and your observation. So I understand, particularly because people care deeply about their horses, and so they want to do things really well. But sometimes if something is worth doing, it's worth doing poorly to begin with, or messily, or in an uncontrolled or non-perfect way while you build your own ability. And I have had to learn that about myself, because I am a bit of a perfectionist. And so if you are listening and you are like me and you want to walk in and do it perfectly the first time, and so you think you need to review every possible video that there is to do about something, you need to have learned from someone else, you need to have watched another webinar. If you just go and have a go with some direction from somebody who has the knowledge to help you, you just get somewhere. So yeah, being concerted about how can we creatively take ourselves forward, even if it feels like a bit of a crawl, particularly because overall, when it comes to your horse, the body needs maintenance, and we are the key to that. Because when you're thinking about your horse, you said it really well before when you said that they can only communicate between their behaviour, posture, and their movement. And so their body is a representation of their environment, of their input and stimulus, their response to that input and stimulus based on their own internal, their threshold, their body, the way that they feel. And so you are the key to that as the owner. And when you take responsibility with the right support, you can make a lot of change in the right direction. And, we were talking just before about the fact that there is no replication for your input. So you were talking about the fact that when you go and see horses and you're like, oh, it's all on me to create this change using my bodywork, there unfortunately is no replacement for the input of the owner in between bodywork sessions, in between the saddle and bit fit, in between the hoof care. And also there's no replacement for the environment that they can create for their horse. So, we can only create the change that the owner is able to maintain. But if your horse needs to be doing exercises or mobilizations, or they need directed support a couple of sessions or multiple sessions a week, or before their ridden sessions, there is nobody who can replace that. It falls to you. And we don't want to make that sound like we're calling you out, or that we're like cracking the whip or trying to give you a big motivational talk, but just to acknowledge the fact that you are a valuable part of the team. And it's a journey that needs support, and it needs direction, and it needs people who are experienced, because we expect our hoof care professionals to have a broad base of knowledge. We want them to have had qualifications. We want them to have had good mentors. We want them to be thinking about all the different hoof boots and glue-ons and treatments and everything that you can think of. And we want them to know, all the different people that we find on social media so we can ask them about whatever we read. But then when it comes to our input, most owners are not professionals, but we have the biggest influence over our horse, the paddock that we put them in, the height that we feed them at, the choice of tack that we use, or the choice of professional that we use. We choose their diet most of the time. A lot of people are beginning to use nutritionists, but we choose the nutritionist. We choose the saddle fitter, and we choose the exercises we do. We choose the trainer who gives us advice on the exercises. And so our ability to discern, to observe our horse, and to understand what we're getting into with every bit of information we consume and what we do with our horses, we need knowledge and skill and professional direction. It actually does amaze me. In studying equine science, I really, it's a science degree looking at what makes up, a body and everything that goes into it, from learning and diet and the environment and stresses. And it's actually amazing that we house horses across the world in so many different environments. And the fact that we have so much to take care of, all the things, when you look at a body, it's a complex, amazing system from a cellular level to an organism level. And there are so many particular things that influence that body. It's incredible that we have horses and we manage to keep them in domestic environments. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And I really do believe that the more knowledge and skill and professional direction that we have, the happier our horses are, and the better our experience gets to be with them as well. And I would say too, I thought of this just before, is the fact that it wasn't until after I'd studied, and it was when I was really starting to put this kind of this work into action, making observations, checking back in, what do I see? How can I be creative? That I was able to have a deeper relationship with a horse. It's that to have that feeling of, I do think that you love me in return, because I can see all of you when you're not enjoying things and you are enjoying things, and the small parts day to day where you want to be with me and you don't. It really becomes so much more when you're really with them.
Yeah, I think, as a horse owner myself, especially with horses, which is obviously part of my journey, but I also think it's just part of me being an observer and a critical thinker and asking a lot of questions, that I get horses that challenge me, but I could have easily labeled those horses in different ways. And, for Jelly with his muscle condition, I've had to advocate, for him in terms of, like, when I took him to the Karen Ralph clinic, I knew that was it was really pushing his body. It was a long float trip. It was days in the stable, which he's better not in the stable. And I hadn't really managed him in that way before. So as a horse owner in that situation, it was my responsibility to figure out the best management for him. And I was just thinking about it last night, because I remember, at the end of the last day, he was not 100%, and I knew that he wasn't 100% because I knew his body, right? No one else probably would have known that who was watching him, because they don't have a reference point for where he can be at when he's at his best, and also where he can be at when he's at his worst. And I remember Karen saying, "Oh, well, like, I was riding bridleless," and she's like, "Well, do you want to canter?" And I was like, "No, I don't want to canter, because he's not physically okay today, and I know that I could canter. Nothing bad's probably going to happen, but it wouldn't be in the best interest of his body." I also had to figure out, I was syringing supplements into him because I knew if he didn't eat the supplements, he was definitely going to tie up. And, and then over time, I've learnt, okay, this works for him. I have to trot him out regularly, but not too much so that he gets fatigued, but enough that he's moving. You know, I can't let him stand around in the stable or need to keep him warm. Like figuring out what things work for him and what things don't, and also when to advocate and say, no, I'm not going to do that. And I've pulled out of competitions because he wasn't quite right, which was really hard because I was letting a team down. And I've had Ellie booked in for lessons and I've decided not to take her because something just wasn't right that day. It is the hardest thing to do as a horse owner, to pull out of something or not take your horse somewhere. And whether that's a competition or going for a trail ride with your friends or going to a training day or even just riding yourself. There were a couple of weeks ago, I shared it on my Facebook page, but I went to hop on Jelly, and when I did his pre-exercises, I noted a couple of things that he did that he doesn't usually do. Like he moved away when I did the pelvic exercise, and he pooed when I lifted up his back leg and nearly shat on my head. And I should have been like, oh, that's a warning sign. And then when I went to hop on him, like usually when I hop up on the mounting block, wherever that is, he picks me up. Like he literally steps in towards me and he's like, okay, let's go. Well, he stepped away from me and he just kept stepping away from me. And I didn't ride. I was saddled up. I was outside my gate. I was ready to go. And it is the hardest thing to do because we have our horses often to ride, to go, he's not right today, I'm not going to ride. And I went back and I didn't ride, and I treated him, figured it out, and worked from there. And so, yeah, it can be hard to take that responsibility. The other thing I did recently was, I was talking to my trimmer about improving the horse's feet. And one thing that she said that stuck out to me was like, well, if you really want to make a difference, you need to trim them in between my trims. And I get my horses trimmed on a 5-week cycle. And it kills me to trim them. But I did this time. I trimmed them in between. And maybe I didn't do the perfect job, but I did it. And so, next time she can tell me, like, well, adjust this, adjust that. But maybe I also made a big difference for my horse because it's only been 2 weeks, I think. So it's basically halfway between trims. There was foot to balance. There was toe to take off. Now, what does that mean for my horse? It means that when she comes next time, it's not the big change. It also means that I'm keeping them more balanced in between. But it also means that I'm taking responsibility for my horse's feet. Trimming on a 5-weekly cycle is basic horse care, in my opinion. 6 weeks, absolute maximum. Any longer than that, to me, is not basic horse care. So, again, it's our responsibility. If we want change, we need to create the change. It's like with the saddle fit, you learning to recognize, not just getting the saddle fitter back every 6 months, but you learning to recognize the little signs that your saddle is not quite right now. For example, your horse's back shape. We did a podcast recently on observing your horse's back shape before and after riding. That's your responsibility. Observing sweat patches, things that might change. So, and then the other aspect of that is doing things to continue to improve your horse's posture. And really what we're doing with the equine functional posture course is helping you improve those observation skills, but supporting you through, when you submit a video, we give you feedback and we help you improve the way your horse is doing it, the way you're doing it. We focus on you as well. It's not just about the horse's posture. And we had, especially in level 2, we see some like that's where some of the magic happens. But we had a person recently and she was having lessons. Now, you want to get the most out of your lesson, right? And she said, well, usually her trainer would come and it would take them most of that lesson to just get the horse working well. And then for the last 10, 15 minutes, the horse would be working really well. Well, through doing the functional posture course, she's figured out what her horse needs pre-ride to actually start the horse well from the start. So she, figured out a few key exercises. She's also acknowledges her horse differently when he turns around and gives her feedback. She started to acknowledge him for that instead of just telling him to, hey, put your head straight, stop doing that. He went when she acknowledged that. And then she's figured out, okay, he needs these specific exercises. And when I do these religiously before I hop on, we start 40 minutes ahead, and her trainer commented geez, he's working well today. It hasn't taken us 40 minutes to just get him going. That's your responsibility as a horse owner to figure out what your horse needs to optimize their work session so that you're not just spending half the time doing crappy work, really, because you want to be able to hop on and optimize that session. It means you can do a shorter, more concentrated session. You get actual progress, actual improvement, and you're not getting the same, you're not having a lesson with your trainer. It's the same every time. You actually can make progress. What else have you noticed that people get out of the functional posture course in terms of helping, them help the horses?
Definitely the ability to always have things to do with the horse, even when you have injuries, so they don't go backwards. This can be a really difficult part of some people's horse journey. I was even just thinking about it before with Jelly, and the fact that, you're making the comment that he went to the Karen Rolfe clinic and you couldn't canter. And there would be some people who would say, well, if he can't canter, you shouldn't be riding him. But I remember when you first got Jelly, and we've seen so many, you've got a lot of pictures of and videos of him moving and how he used to stand. So Jelly, years ago now, when you took a picture from behind, you're standing behind him, he's square, his legs look twisted. They look like his feet are pointing in different directions. One of his hocks is turned out. His pelvis isn't level. And through ongoing movement and postural work, he's a different commitment and responsibility.
And nutrition and foot balance and foot care and all the things that was my responsibility
to get him here. And there have been times when you've had to ask the question, can you do this? Can you do that? How do you feel today? But if you hadn't continued to show up and work with him where he was, Jelly wouldn't have the privilege of feeling the way he does today, because we've said this before, Jelly would rather be him now than be him those years ago. But in order to get there, it has meant that, sometimes you're walking out and saying, I don't know what I'm going to do with you today because you're stiff and you look a bit crotchety, and we're going to start walking and we're going to see what we can do, and we're going to use some exercises. And so it's difficult because sometimes sometimes being in the position where you would normally say, I don't think I can ride this horse, means that that's a horse that needs movement, and that horse needs good movement that's careful for the way that they are, if you ever want to get back to being more comfortable, whether or not that's ridden or not. So that inside the course, that support is, being able to have someone say, okay, I've seen a video of your horse now. Here is where I think you're at. This is what I want you to do, and ask this question and see what response you get, and where are we next week? So that continual feedback of like, okay, this is where your horse is at. I think you can ask a bit more, or I don't think you can ask a bit more, because we're just looking for improvement and progress over time, not perfection. But yeah, having things to do with your horse, either so they're not going backwards if you are in a stable for an injury and you need to have an active recovery, or if you have an older horse and you say, well, I want them to be comfortable as they, as they've transitioned out of work, now they're mainly in the paddock. What am I going to do to support them, to keep them happy and playing and active? And what do I need to be seeing to know that they are still comfortable? And what do I need to be doing to, think about their diet and their joints, and what are the things that even contribute to having their joints stay happy, so that I don't need to keep them on medication. That in itself is a level of responsibility for us to say, what other things contribute to a healthy body besides pharmaceuticals? If, whether your horse needs them or not, but, what's available and what support can you have? And also the fact that another thing that I believe is very valuable is understanding more about your horse's body. Doesn't mean you need to learn every muscle and every joint or anything specific, but there are foundational movements or functions that your horse should be able to do. Your horse should be able to reach the ground without having to bend one leg or have a big split stance. And your horse should be able to, scratch their side. I've seen some horses that they literally cannot bend around and have a little scratch, or they can't lift. It feels really stiff for them to reach into a certain food bucket. And I've attended horses before where they say, oh, he doesn't like to eat out of the bucket, and that's because the horse is not comfortable reaching into a certain bucket or a height of hay net. And so there are foundational movements the horse should be able to do, and so your ability to see whether or not your horse can or can't do them is very important.
Yeah, and it definitely makes a big difference for your body worker as well. Like, I also know that we have a lot of body workers and trainers and hoof care professionals and people like that do the course, and what they say is that when they apply the principles that they've learned in the course for their clients, that it makes their job easier because the clients are implementing those exercises, and overall, improving the horse's posture, well-being, and their level of observation and awareness. So by you taking responsibility for that, it helps and actually enriches the lives of your horse professionals, and also improves that conversation that you can have with them, because you have that kind of base level of knowledge. You know your horse's body inside out. Like, I could tell you probably, it's always will be interesting to see under dissection, but I feel like I can always highlight in my horses where their strengths and weaknesses are, what's difficult for them, what's fun for them, what they mostly enjoy, what they don't enjoy. I'm still learning with Ellie what her communications always mean, but like with Jelly, you can just read their facial expressions and know where they're at from a day-to-day basis. And I think what someone said last night in the course is that, I asked people what they were going into level 2, and I asked them, what did you get out of level 1? And one of them said to remain curious, and to be curious about your horse's behaviour, posture and movement, rather than create a judgment or to create a limitation through, you go, oh my God, my horse is lame again. Oh my God, my horse is sore again. And trust me, it happened all the time with Jelly in the early days. He would have a week off and I'd be like, oh, he's short again in that hind. His hamstrings feel like crap. His back looks like crap. It took me a long time to figure out what worked for him and what didn't work for him. And the best work regime and the type of work to do, and when to feed him relative to when I worked him, and even what time of day to work him, because I figured out that if it was too hot and he got sweaty, sometimes that wasn't good for his muscles. And I figured out that when he would stop when I was riding him, it meant that something was going on with his muscles, not that he was just stopping because he didn't want to do the work. And that all took me time to figure out, and I pushed through at times too, to the detriment. I learned, when I pushed through, this is what happened. And when I didn't push through, this is what happened. And so as a horse owner, it's a lot of trial and error, but it's getting people that help you on that journey. And that's really, what we aim to do in the functional posture course is, yes, there's foundational exercises and things, but we're really helping you to take that responsibility with your horse, get to know your horse on a different level, try to figure out and understand why they're doing it, what they're doing, and empower you to have the conversations with your professionals so that ultimately you can improve the welfare for your horse. So I think that's really the key, and that we all need to just take more responsibility as horse owners and recognize that we have the position as the horse owner to create the biggest change for our horse, to influence their welfare, their day-to-day living, and to figure out what works for them, not what works for us.
Definitely. And yeah, I mean, we have a good following base of people who've done the podcast. So if you've listened, then this is a good reminder to review your materials and keep at it and keep going, because it's always change and improvement is always possible. And if you haven't joined us, then it would be lovely to have you, and so that you can create some really meaningful change.
Yeah, and some really meaningful foundations that, we've had people in the course who've done a lot of other courses, and they all have their value and their merit, but what they've said that the functional posture course has given them is that ability to observe in a more specific way and to slow down and really see their horse, like their individual horse, for where they're at. And that's where the change and the magic has happened. And then they can still apply all the wonderful skills and knowledge that they've learnt from other courses, but they're just applying it with more specific, individualized knowledge of their own horse. And we've seen horses that are well in their 20s create amazing changes in their posture, their behavior, their ability to work, their willingness to want to do things, like the horse that's like cantering down the hill that usually walks and takes time and looks terrible coming down the hill, and the horse that stopped messing up his stable at night just through getting him more comfortable. Like now his stable's like a perfectly ordered little house. When she goes in the morning to clean it up, it's like poo one spot, hay one spot, whereas before it was just a mess because he obviously wasn't comfortable overnight. So yeah, and these are older horses that we're seeing the changes in, and it's really just individual horse recognition. So do your horse a favor and come and join us.
Yes, absolutely. And not just old horses. We've had some awesome performance horses come through, and they have had, pardon?
And babies.
And babies. I have genuinely used all of this with foals, and it's very useful. And I've been seeing one foal recently with a split stance, and we've been super intentional about some of our stretches and coming down to the ground, and even with once or twice a week repetitions, we're having a really big change in in movement patterns that'll set horses up for life. So yeah, every age, every horse, and yeah, every person can also make change. There's nobody who isn't capable. I really believe that.
Yeah, 100%. So thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler and Sophie Vandenberg in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so that we can share more valuable insights. Reach out with any listener requests for topics that you would like us to talk about. And if you are a business aligned with our mission, then reach out to become a sponsor of the podcast.
And we'll see you in the next exciting episode.